Okay, so a government shutdown is looming, threatening to halt federal operations by the end of the month.
It is big deadline coming up.
But honestly, you shouldn't let that short-term political drama distract you from the financial reckoning that is speeding toward America right now.
Exactly. That's the real story here. What we're looking at in Washington is a really high-stakes fiscal conflict. It goes far beyond just keeping the lights on for a few weeks.
Right.
The legislative sources you sent us, they detail an incredibly ambitious, sort of multi-layered agenda. It's anchored by that, well, aptly named, One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OBBA.
OBBBA, yeah. Heard a lot about that one.
And it's designed to lock in critical pro-growth policies, enforce some spending discipline, and, simplify government functions. But it's facing intense, immediate opposition.
So our mission today is to cut through that noise and really unpack that source material for you. What the, frankly, dire federal debt projections actually mean, the profound impact OBBA's already had on the balance of power, and how congressional Republicans are using this current budget battle to try and force some long-term fiscal discipline.
Okay, let's start with the hard numbers, because they are truly staggering. I mean, historically unprecedented for the U.S. The Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, they officially project that debt held by the public starts at 99% of our gross domestic product this year, 2024.
99%. That is essentially carrying a national debt equal to our entire annual national economy.
Pretty much, yeah. And it gets worse. That debt is projected to surge to 127% of GDP by 2039.
127%.
Think about that for a moment. 127% of our entire national economy just in debt. These numbers are already starting to approach the kind of precarious finances you see in places like Italy or Portugal.
And the sources really emphasize that even these terrifying official CBO projections, they rely on an optimistic set of assumptions, don't they?
They absolutely do. The CBO's current law baseline, which is basically the path they project if current laws just stay exactly as they are, it assumes spending will be contained as a share of GDP.
Okay.
It assumes revenues will rise, and critically, it assumes interest rates will fall.
So if interest rates stay high, or if spending keeps ballooning, which, let's be honest, feels more likely,
right,
then that time for a fiscal reckoning moves forward pretty dramatically. That optimism about the budget, it isn't just dangerous. It almost seems like a political strategy to, well, ignore the inevitable.
Precisely. And that sense of urgency is what the sources say drove the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This wasn't just another budget bill. It was a massive legislative accomplishment for the majority party, designed to really cement core priorities they believe will set the country on a path to, sustained long-term economic growth.
So what did OBBA specifically achieve? I was struck by how the sources highlighted the top priority was securing permanent, massive tax relief.
That was definitely front and center. For starters, it permanently extended the 2017 tax cuts. That alone removed a huge source of future tax uncertainty for businesses, for families.
And they added more on top.
Oh, yeah. They layered new reductions on top of that, showing a deep commitment to this growth-centric approach. We're talking about things like reducing taxes on income from overtime and tips.
Okay.
And a significant increase in the standard deduction specifically for seniors.
But OBBA was really a two-pronged approach, wasn't it? Not just tax relief. It was also a massive commitment to national security and border enforcement.
It was indeed. Huge commitment there. The bill dedicated significant multi-year funding, $156.2 billion for national defense.
Right.
And an even larger chunk, $202.8 billion, specifically targeted at border security and immigration enforcement. It's really hard to overstate the scale of that investment.
And here's the political dynamite, maybe. OBBA also eliminated the immediate threat of a debt ceiling crisis by increasing the statutory debt limit by a colossal $5 trillion.
$5 trillion.
$5 trillion. That's not just raising the ceiling, that's sending the whole roof into orbit. And it completely changed the legislative leverage game, didn't it?
It absolutely did. But, we have to look at the immediate costs to understand the underlying strategy. According to the CBO, relative to that current law baseline we just discussed, OBBA would increase the deficit by $3.4 trillion over the next decade.
Okay, see, that seems counterintuitive if the ultimate goal is fiscal discipline. How does the source material rationalize widening the deficit initially?
Well, legislative strategy detailed in the sources, it's centered on this belief that spending is the core long-term structural problem.
Okay, spending's the issue.
Right. And that large tax cuts are necessary to spur enough economic growth to eventually generate the revenue needed to sort of outpace the debt, they're making a fundamental growth-first calculation, even if it means short-term deficits get bigger.
Got it. That brings us directly to the cuts then, the ones that were enacted or proposed. The sources clearly indicate Republicans are focused on restructuring mandatory spending. OBBBA itself included $1.4 trillion in mandatory spending reductions over 10 years.
And those were politically difficult cuts, no doubt, because they primarily targeted major safety net programs. Medicaid, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP.
SNAP, right. Food stamps.
And student loan programs. Furthermore, the broader House budget resolution aims for at least $1.5 trillion in total spending cuts over a decade, with a specific target of reducing mandatory expenditures by $2 trillion.
$2 trillion for mandatory.
Yeah. For proponents, these are viewed as necessary steps, painful maybe, necessary for long-term fiscal health.
Now, in fairness, the administration does argue the revenue side will help offset these costs. We see CBO estimates suggesting President Trump's higher tariffs could boost federal revenues by $2.5 trillion over 10 years?
That's the number they cite, yes. $2.5 trillion over 10 years, which they state will significantly mitigate the deficit impact of the tax cuts.
Okay, and that complexity leads us straight into the immediate pressing political crisis. This appropriations impasse driving the looming government shutdown deadline on September 30th.
This is where the tactical maneuvering gets really intense, as you said. Congressional Republicans, with the full backing of the president, offered what they called a clean continuing resolution, a CR.
Okay, maybe pause there. What exactly is a clean CR for folks listening?
Sure. A continuing resolution, or CR, it's essentially a temporary stopgap measure. It keeps funding rolling when Congress can't agree on the full long-term budget bills.
Like a pause button.
Kinda, yeah. And the GOP offered a clean CR to fund the government through November 21st, emphasizing it contained no partisan policy riders whatsoever. Just keep the lights on.
But the Democrats blocked that clean CR.
They did.
Instead, they released a counteroffer filled with policy riders. So this is where we see the high-stakes policy fight playing out inside a must-pass budget bill.
Precisely. Their demands were specific. They insisted on a permanent extension of the Obamacare enhanced premium tax credits.
Okay.
And they insisted on rolling back nearly $1 trillion in those Medicaid cuts that were just enacted in OBBBA. They want to use this funding bill to reverse policy they don't like.
And Senate Majority Leader Thune did not hold back in rejecting that counteroffer, did he?
No, he did not. He dismissed it as filthy and a cold-blooded partisan political attempt to score points. He argued the clean CR was the simple bipartisan way to keep the government open temporarily while they negotiate.
What's tactically fascinating here, and a key insight from the sources, is how the earlier passage of OBBBA fundamentally changed the Democrats' negotiating position. How so?
Well, they lost two major points of leverage, things they typically rely on during these funding fights. First, the need to raise the debt ceiling.
Gone, thanks to OBBBA.
Gone, thanks to that $5 trillion increase. Second, the traditional requirement for parity, equal increases between defense and non-defense spending.
Also gone.
Also gone, because OBBBA already provided massive long-term funding for defense and border security, so they couldn't hold defense hostage for domestic spending in the same way.
So the Democrats no longer have the same tactical power to force policy concessions through, say, the threat of a default or by demanding equal spending bumps.
Yeah.
It's a very different fight this year.
It is a fundamentally different landscape. And the consequence of this gridlock is that lawmakers essentially left town. They left only 2 working days before the deadline.
2 days.
Right. And while mandatory spending, things like Social Security, Medicare, those core Medicaid services, that stuff continues uninterrupted.
Good to know.
All discretionary spending stops.
And we know the human cost of that failure, don't we? We only have to look back to the 2018 shutdown. Approximately 800,000 federal employees were affected as discretionary spending just ceased.
Yeah, that disruption, even if temporary, it places intense political pressure on the majority to resolve the funding crisis. People feel it directly.
Okay, so moving beyond the immediate budget fight, the sources reveal a parallel sort of concerted effort to streamline government functions and really cut down on regulatory drag. This seems like a crucial element of the conservative agenda, making the economy more efficient.
Absolutely. That efficiency drive is happening on multiple fronts. We saw Senate Republicans change chamber rules to speed up the confirmation process for lower-level nominees.
Right, tackling obstruction.
Their argument was it was necessary to counter unprecedented obstruction and, keep the administrative state running efficiently.
And policy-wise?
Policy-wise, we see the Bipartisan Speed Act advancing. This legislation aims to modernize the permitting process under NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. That's the big law governing environmental reviews for major projects.
And the goal of modernizing NEPA, it isn't just about roads and bridges, is it? It's broader than that.
No, it has huge national security and economic growth implications. Republicans have stressed that these lengthy bureaucratic permitting delays, they don't just hinder traditional energy infrastructure. They also severely limit the electricity and transmission capacity needed to support the rapid development of artificial intelligence, AI data centers, right? Which is a massive competitiveness issue globally.
Interesting connection. We also see some targeted regulatory shifts happening within the administration itself. For example, the EPA is moving to defend a Biden-era rule requiring the removal of nearly all lead drinking water pipes within a decade.
Right, a commitment to clean water there, though they have signaled they'll introduce implementation flexibilities to ease the burden on states and localities, trying to balance the goal with the practicalities.
Now, there was one proposed regulatory shift concerning data that caused a surprising amount of controversy, even within Republican ranks, wasn't there?
Yeah, that was interesting. The EPA proposed eliminating the greenhouse gas reporting program entirely. The idea was cost saving, reducing paperwork and federal reporting burdens.
But that effort at cost saving caused an immediate pushback.
It did. From Senate Republicans and key industry groups, they expressed serious concern that eliminating this vital reporting data could cause U.S. companies to lose access to federal carbon capture tax credits.
Which are a major GOP policy goal themselves.
Exactly, designed to incentivize energy innovation. And losing those credits, or the data to verify them, could weaken America's competitive standing abroad, particularly against competitors like China and Russia. It just proves that the quest for efficiency sometimes needs to be balanced against the need for reliable, verifiable data.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together for you, the listener. We've unpacked sources detailing a really complex, layered legislative agenda here. The core achievement seems to be securing massive tax reform and long-term defense spending through OBBBA,
Right.
while simultaneously pushing for regulatory efficiency reforms across different agencies.
And the key takeaway, really, is that the entire Republican strategy outlined in these sources, it's centered on the belief that securing large tax cuts spurs economic growth, and that aggressively cutting massive, unsustainable mandatory spending is the only necessary fiscal path forward.
Regardless of the immediate political noise.
Regardless of the immediate political noise or even the threat of a government shutdown, the immediate funding fight, from this perspective, is simply the mechanism being used to try and force Democrats to stop resisting those OBBBA-related cuts and accept the new fiscal framework.
Okay, so considering the CBO's stark warning that the current fiscal trajectory is utterly unsustainable, here's the provocative thought for you to consider. If Congress successfully avoids a shutdown, maybe by passing another temporary funding measure, will the political focus pivot immediately to the inevitable, much larger battle? The battle over truly restructuring mandatory spending programs like Social Security and Medicare to secure America's long-term financial future. That feels like the real reckoning coming down the road, and the sources suggest it just cannot be avoided for much longer.